Hey, Joyful Journeyer, Anita Adams here, your host. And today I'm excited to introduce you to Lisa Boate, who is the founder of Liberated Menopause Consulting and Coaching and a passionate advocate for creating menopause empowered workplaces. Lisa is also the host of the Transforming 45 podcast, where she holds space for candid conversations about midlife transition, exploring topics ranging from menopause to personal growth. Lisa's mission is to empower women to navigate this significant life transition with confidence and reclaim their vitality in the workplace and beyond. Today, Lisa and I are going to explore the link between how a physical transition in the body through menopause demands a spiritual transition. Welcome, Lisa. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Anita, it's lovely to be in conversation with you. We had a conversation on my show a couple of weeks ago, and there's nothing I love more than doing an exchange because you get to hear both sides of perspective, right? So it's one of my favorite things. So thanks for having me today.
It's my delight, and I really enjoyed being on your show. Thank you for that opportunity, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with my listeners as well. And I'm
Yeah.
really excited to explore this topic as it's one I've never really considered before. This connection between the physical and spiritual change one undergoes during menopause. We'll dive into that in a minute, but before we do, I'd really love for you to give us a little bit of a background about your personal journey with perimenopause and menopause and how it led you to the work you're doing today in supporting women.
Yeah, it's a bit of a winding road, as most journeys are. Right? So I was an educator for 20 years. And this is something that is coming up for me a lot lately. And it is the fact that I did not ever want to be an educator.
Hmm.
I loved children, and it felt like a sure bet and a safe space to be. And it was spirit speaking to me right from the beginning, saying, this is really not the place for you. And despite that voice, which I had always heard, I did what we often do, and that is like, shh, but this is working for me. Right? And all the way through, I could feel this tension, right? This push pull of, are you sure this is working for you? And it's because the system of education itself, I found to be stifling. And so I've spent my career pushing against this system, trying to make more space for people to be able to be their whole selves, because I didn't ever feel like I could be my whole self. And eventually, that push against something, a system that doesn't really want to change, became more than I had the energy to push against. And so I ended up resigning from education. And when I did that, there was this moment of great release.
Hmm.
It was a moment of, well, it took you long enough to listen, but we're glad you're here now. And it's interesting because every time I've had this thought of, well, maybe I could just go back or dip my toe in this area of education, there is a big message from the universe every single time that is like, how many times do we have to tell you that this space is not for you? So that's the sort of like overarching piece of the journey. And now I also understand that there were physical elements at play in the last 3 and 4 years of my career. And that was, I was experiencing perimenopause, but I did not even know it because I didn't know what perimenopause was really until I started taking my menopause coaching certification. So the way I see this interplay is that we put ourselves into the space of numbness, of self-abandonment, until one of two things happens. Either we do actually just start to listen to our bodies, to spirit, to however it is that you connect, or our bodies, our physical bodies say, you haven't been listening, and now we are taking over. And we are going to do things The body is going to experience things that make it impossible for you to ignore, right? So for me, it was like my hair started falling out and I was having panic attacks at work all the time. And I was crying in my car every single day. And that was the body saying, we are going to keep upping the ante on what you're experiencing until you listen and you do what is actually meant for you.
That is really fascinating. I love this comparison, and how you started to really listen. That it's that you had to. You felt like you were forced to. So so do you feel like that is spirit working through us in causing these changes? Like or is it you saying, okay, I got to, something's wrong here. I got to stop and I've got to figure out what's going on? And when did you start making the connection that you needed to change what you were doing in your professional life to help ease the stress and the anxiety and all the stuff that was going on, and you just didn't say, well, that's just hormonal stuff?
Well, so I have been spiritually connected my whole life. Like I actually can't remember a time when I wasn't. And I also am a Reiki practitioner and I had done Reiki part one, oh gosh, in like 2011. My kids were really little. So I had that really deep awareness of the spirit body connection. And part of what I struggled with in education was not being able to use some of those energetic tools that I knew would be able to make a difference, not only for myself, but for the young humans who are around me. And I'm not talking about religion, right? This is not about religion, because I had kids in my class from all different religions, which I loved, and they brought all aspects of themselves and they talked about that. But I am talking about spirit and energy, right? And how we create energetic spaces that allow people to thrive. And when you are working in a really, really academic place, like a school or an education system, there's this sense of having to shut that down because it's really not accepted or welcomed in that academic community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always struggled with talking to children about bringing all aspects of their identity into a space and loving them for, sorry, getting emotional, and loving them for all of those aspects of themselves. But I wasn't doing the same. I was presenting a very curated version of myself that was acceptable to the system.
Mm.
So for me, the body and the spirit, they're too intertwined for me to say that it was hormonal and body or that it was spirit. It really was this coming together of both. And it was the messages when they became so strong from both spirit and universe and my body colliding,
Mm.
where people often say to me, you're so brave that you walked away from this stability.
Mm.
And that is where my imposter syndrome lies, because it didn't feel brave. It felt like the only option. And that I was either going to live or I was going to keep walking down the road I had been walking, but those two things were not going to coexist.
Mm. Wow, it's really powerful. And I like what you said, the full beingness of who we are is spiritual. We are, even if you don't identify as a spiritual being, we are all spiritual beings, right?
Yes.
And to deny that part of ourselves can be traumatic for the body in many ways, right? I
Mm-hmm.
went through a similar lifting, I call it lifting the lid. And actually I write about this in my book. There's a chapter called Lifting the Lid, and it's
Mm-hmm.
allowing my spiritualness, my spiritual being to really fully emerge, to really the full body of who I am to emerge. And when you allow for that, there is a release. There is a release in the body. There's a release in in your awareness, in your joy. There's all of that is allowed to come out. And I think you're right that, society is puts the lid on us. It forces us to keep parts of us hidden and pushed down, and I'm starting to see how going through this through menopause can really be a catalyst to help you lift the lid. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said that. And I am observing the same experience and I'm having the same experience. And that is, and it's again, it's that coming together of spirit and body. Because during menopause, your body is shifting and changing in ways that you can't ignore.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, you can, but it's not, that's
Yeah.
not the recommended path. If you ignore it, it's not going to get better, trust me.
Yeah.
So the body is calling us back to live in this vessel again, to
Yeah.
give to it, to it's why I love positioning perimenopause and menopause in this way. And it is if you listen to your body, if you listen to the wisdom of your body, it can be a much smoother process,
Mm.
right? So symptoms that we experience are actually messages from your body telling you what to do. So when we are experiencing hot flushes or night sweats, if you really pay attention to when those get ignited and triggered, often it's connected to stress, it's connected to alcohol, it's connected to food that maybe doesn't sit well with you anymore. So if you pay attention to them to that as a message and you make those shifts and changes, suddenly your body thanks you and those symptoms are not as strong and severe as they were. So it really is this powerful opportunity to really be here and present and pay attention, like pouring all of the love that we have spent our lifetimes. Generally, I know I'm speaking in generalizations, but often women spend our lives pouring love into everybody around us,
Mm.
and we don't pour that same love into ourselves. And so now there is the time to do that, to pour all that love into ourselves and to welcome all of the aspects of ourselves and really be here in our wholeness.
Mhm.
And it's this really beautiful leadership that starts to emerge when women are in our bodies in that way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. What is your position on treatments like hormone replacement therapy and all of that?
My position is whatever works for you,
Okay, thank you.
right?
Please, thank you.
Yeah. Like every woman's journey is so different.
Yes.
And I just made a post about this last week. So this is a very timely question because I see people coming for each other, right? Depending on what they choose, what path they choose. So some people feel very strongly about this is a natural time, it's a natural evolution. This is how I'm going to do that. Other people use HRT, and both are equal and valid as long as you are coming at it from an informed choice and
Yeah.
perspective and really knowing and understanding the science. There are there's lots of misinformation about HRT that came from studies in the early 2000s. So there's a lot of science showing us that it is really safe. And if you are a person who is having word recall and brain fog, I have had women come to me feeling like they are in the early stages of dementia.
Mm.
And so when those are impeding your quality of life, and HRT, if you take HRT, it alleviates those things so you can have a better quality of life. Fabulous, good for you. If you choose that you want to go ashwagandha and lifestyle choices only, that also is totally fine because we get to choose
Yeah.
and make these decisions for what's best for us now.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. I struggled with that before. I am a user.
Yeah.
I take do the estrogen and progesterone, and but there was a time where I really was resistant to it because I felt like, I should be able to do this naturally, and like I'm all about connecting with nature and lowering those stress levels, and yeah, that's all good. And
Yes.
I was suffering with some serious brain fog and not sleeping. And I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
I want to have a quality of life. And if this treatment does what which I did the research as well and dug deep, and I'm like, okay, there's some really good information out there. But there's a lot of misinformation out there too, which makes it
Yes.
really confusing, which is why it's so important to have people like you in the world who are helping to demystify a lot of it. And I do want to come back to that the spiritual and physical
Mhm.
connection. But before we do, why don't you help with shedding some light on some of the misconceptions out there around perimenopause and menopause? Because I think this will be helpful for some of our listeners.
Mhm. Do you mean specifically HRT or like the whole thing in general?
Oh, well, that's a good question because there's a lot, unless it's too big of a topic. I'd love to have you
Yeah.
debunk some of the biggest myths around perimenopause and menopause,
Yes.
and then debunk a couple of the biggest myths around HRT.
Perfect. So the two biggest myths I want to debunk around perimenopause are one, that you're too young, or that this is just the way your life is now. So if I had a dime for every time I heard a woman say that to me after visiting a healthcare practitioner who, it's not their fault. Women's body have not been well researched. And so there's not a lot of knowledge in the medical community unless you're menopause specialists, and they exist out there and are doing incredible advocacy work. However, at the lowest level in the medical community, most don't know a lot about perimenopause and menopause. And so perimenopause can last for up to 10 to 12 years and often starts around the age of 35.
Wow, that I did not know.
Yes. And most women don't. And it's really important because at 35, especially in our culture at this point, often women have young children. And so a lot of the symptoms that they're experiencing, they attribute to having young children. That's not to say that that's not possible. And perimenopause can start to be at play there. So there's that. And then in the HRT component, sorry, going back to, and this is just how your life is now, that also is not the right answer. Stress management, sleep, movement, and nutrition. Those are that we call them the core four, as they are for health and wellness in general, right? But those core four are essential. And the younger that you start getting those routines in place, the more investment you've made in your body, which means you have that much more resource as you age. So actually incorporating those strategies as early as you can is really important. And then a lot of the misinformation around HRT comes from, in the early 2000s, there was a study that came out, and I remember it because my grandma was on HRT. I remember my mom coming in hot after reading this article and saying, Mom, you need to get off all of that HRT. It was a very small sample size that they looked at, and the majority of women who were in that sample had a higher likelihood of developing breast cancer even without being on HRT. And the study also was misrepresented in the media, as often happens. The data wasn't very well understood within the media community. And so I can't remember the percentages, but it went from something like 80% of women being on HRT to 10% of women being on HRT. And the result of that actually was that more women died from broken hips than ever did from an increase in breast cancer
Oh, wow.
rates, because estrogen has protective factors for every system in your body, including bones. So the women who went off HRT no longer had that protection for their bones. So osteopenia, osteoporosis rates rose. And the HRT that is used now is not even the same synthetic that it was then, right? there has been a big progression in bioidentical hormones that fit. I had Dr. Lakeisha McMillan on my show, who's amazing, and she described it as like a lock in the key. She said they fit the key, they fit the lock perfectly, whereas before they like mostly fit the lock, but not quite. So the technology is much better. We understand it much better now. It is a very safe alternative. And the other thing, just two quick other things, is that one, the natural route does not have to not coincide with taking medication. We can do both, right? Like the lifestyle elements are essential, and those will help if you choose HRT. It also helps that to be more successful. So they are not mutually exclusive. And then, oh, menopause brain, I just lost. Oh, here it comes. And now it's gone again.
I love that we've got the convenient excuse of saying that we got menopause brain.
Yes, but it's so true. Like it's there and then it's gone and it will come back eventually. But
Yeah.
oh, evolution.
Okay.
So our bodies have and lifespans are evolving faster than the chemical processes inside our bodies, right? So when people talk about that as, well, this is a natural process, yes, yes, it is. This is part of what our bodies go through, but our lifespans are longer, right? We have more time. It's a third of our lives that we live in post menopause, right? Perimenopause, menopause, and post menopause. And we want to have good quality and health span. And if taking HRT helps you with that, then that's what we want. We want those outcomes for ourselves where we can feel good for as long as possible.
That's great. Yeah, I totally get all of that. And yeah, thank you for sharing and helping to debunk some of those myths. I didn't realize that you could actually start the perimenopause process such a young age.
Mhm.
And I love that, like just taking care of your health and the habits that you create, that's lifelong, right? That's lifelong. It serves us in forever. So okay, bringing it back to
Absolutely.
the spiritual side of things. You shared with me before that you felt like this going through menopause liberated you to your truth. And I
Mhm.
love that expression, liberates you to your truth. So is that simply the awareness piece that something needs to change with your well-being and how to step into being the best version of you? Is that what you were talking about, or can you elaborate on that a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of elements at play. One of them being that now I've been on this earth ride for, in my case, 47 years. And there is wisdom that comes with that. So we go through all of the phases. I had a woman on my show. Her name is Shoshana French, and she was talking about the phases of womanhood. Like we have the maiden, we have the mother, and we have the crone. And she's like, but in between the mother and the crone, there actually is this other space. And she referred to it as the queen space.
Hmm.
And which I absolutely loved, right? It's this, and it's not that crone is bad or negative. It's not. It's this like beautiful wisdom that comes with many, many years of experience. And this queen phase, I felt that in my soul when she said it. And I feel like in that perimenopause transition, that's what we're transitioning into. We're transitioning into this queen space where we become leaders,
Hmm.
right? We can step up and show this is what it looks like to live with joy and vitality and our wholeness
Hmm.
in this like sacred queen time. And it's a great way, queens bring people in, right? They're building their kingdom or their queendom. And so we're bringing people into that story. And I love the deeply divine feminineness of that collaboration of like, come in, let's show you the way, but also let's learn from each other. And I think that's where that wholeness comes from. I don't feel like I have to be everything to everyone anymore. I can be a leader and invite other people in and have this beautiful collaborative community, which just feels more authentic than this competition narrative that we've been writing for so long.
I love that analogy, and the image of the queen, because to me, when I think of a queen, I think of confidence, self-assured, knowing who you are, like really understanding yourself and the power you have in yourself, in your stately calmness as well. You know, that
Yes.
image of a queen is somebody that commands authority by just simply being. So beautiful. Thank you for that visual, that image. And that, maybe that the connection again, the menopause causes, or and the perimenopause almost
Mhm.
forces you to go inward and look and understand yourself, forces you to try to really know who you are, right?
Yeah, and it does because it's a time when all of the roles that we have played start falling away, right? So for me with children, I'm also I'm 2 weeks away from an empty nest. I don't know
Hmm.
how this happened, but here we are. So, like that intense, I will always be a mother, obviously, but that intense caregiving mother role is like about to fall away. This, you know, and women holding value during childbearing years, which is the narrative set up in our general culture, right? That falls away. And now there's freedom from that. There's all of these roles that we've been playing, we can put those down and then examine who we actually are, because those roles are not us. They are important, like I said, roles that we play, but they're not who we are. If someone were to ask me, who are you? I'd say, I am curious, I am creative, I am loving, and a leader. That's who I am.
Right.
And then the roles that I play come through the truth of who I actually am. And so being in this space where I no longer feel the pressure to adhere to all of the like good woman, good girl narratives,
Right.
I get to be in this space of the truth, like my actual soul led goddess. I started playing around a little bit with like letting menopause be the hot girl summer of your cycle a little bit.
Love it.
As a play on like we're hot anyway, we might as well like lean into this idea,
Right.
and that there is this playfulness, right? It gets to be a time where we are building a new identity. And so let it be your goddess time, let it be your queen time, let it be the time where you are unapologetically all of you.
That's beautiful. I love what you're saying. Did you have a process for letting go of all of the societal expectations and moving away from the teaching profession and leaning into what you felt you were called to do?
To be quite honest, it was a real big kick from the universe. So the final thing that happened in my career was I had written a tweet about, I was teaching grade 6 online at the time, and I had written this tweet about how it hurt my soul to have to associate a number or a grade with any human being at this point in time. And I attached a research article with it. And I've been doing a lot of work in the assessment world for a long time. So I knew what I was saying was grounded in research. So I tweet this out. It's at report card time. And a couple of days later, my principal comes to me and he's like, Lisa, we need to have a conversation. It's like, what's going on? He's like, well, you tweeted something and somebody has reported you, and we have to go through a full investigation.
Oh, wow.
So, so we go through the full investigation. He couldn't even tell me what the tweet was at the time. So I'm sitting in this deep sense of anxiety, like, what could I possibly have said? And when this was the tweet that was brought forward, I had this moment of, oh, this is it. Okay, right, universe. This was like the final.
I get it
I,
now.
yeah, I get it. Okay, this place is no longer for me. I've been trying to ignore it for a long time. So it was a really quite a dramatic, like, shutting of a door.
Right.
And when I went through the investigation process, at the end of it, I took 6 weeks. I took a 6 week leave right away because my nervous system had been thrown into such a spin. And during those 6 weeks, I baked a lot of bread. I did things that brought me joy. I was just really present to my own needs.
Mm.
And about 4 weeks in, I will never forget this. My youngest child, who was 15 at the time, one morning I came downstairs and I was working in the kitchen and he looked at me and he was like, "Oh, there you are." And
Wow.
it was, yeah, it
Yeah.
was this like when he said that, that was there's no going back,
Yeah, that
right?
I got chills. That is, I think, again, spirit speaking through our children. You got a
Oh,
message big time.
yeah,
Wow, that's beautiful. Wow.
yeah, yeah. It brings tears to my eyes to this day. So it was a pretty swift and dramatic process. And then once I made that final decision, I just continued, I went back and I finished out the year after those 6 weeks because I wanted to wrap up the community with the young humans who were in my care that year. And then in following that, like the September, October, November, December of that year, I just really spent a lot of time doing what I'd done in those 6 weeks, being creative,
Mm.
doing things I'd never really been able to be a present mom in my kids' lives the way I wanted to. So I went to their volleyball games and I spent time with them in those ways.
Yeah.
And it was that process of really listening to and caring for my own needs
Yeah.
that one lit me up, two filled my energy well. So I felt like I had something to give again. And it was that process of realizing I am not the only person who is going through this. And women at this phase, we need community and support to do this together.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to repeat something that you said, that you became present to your own needs. And I think that is so key, and you gave yourself the space and the time to find that presence. And when we do that, that's when we find the answers that we're looking for. That's when we find the clarity that we need to be able to move forward. And unfortunately, most people don't do that. They don't give themselves the space and time. And it feels like, from your story, it was a gift that this whole thing unfolded for you the way it did, because it forced that time. Well, no, I shouldn't say it forced that time. You chose to take that leave. So that was a choice, 100% yours. Bravo. And you gave yourself that space and time to really reflect, to look inward, to connect with your essence and who you are. So yeah, if you take nothing from this show, Joyful Journey, or take that one piece, no matter where you are in life, right? If you're in your perimenopause, menopause, if you're a man and don't experience menopause, you can benefit from that advice that you just gave. There's
Yeah.
clarity that comes, and joy. You tapped into your joy because you gave
Yes.
yourself the time. And look at you now helping women do the same thing. That's awesome. Beautiful.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it feels like my hot girl summer and I'm embracing it.
I love that so much. Hot girl summer and the queen. We're in that queen phase. Beautiful,
That's
beautiful.
right.
So many
Yeah.
great takeaways. So, Lisa, you said that you had a gift that you were going to share with our listeners today. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll make sure that you have the link so that for the show notes so that people can check that out. But it is the guide that I wrote around how to reignite your joy and your purpose in this phase of life. So it's my top 3 strategies for how to do that. And there are things that are really actionable that you can read and do right away. And, this conversation comes up a lot with women where I'll give them one of the strategies and they're like, "Oh yeah, I knew that." It's like, yeah, of course, yes, we know these things and we're so busy holding so much for the structure and the infrastructure of our lives that we need someone to hold us, right? And that's really the purpose of this guide is to be the one who's like, "I am holding you. Let me hold you. Let me pour some care into you until you get to a place where you can do it on your own. But we were never meant to be alone
No.
at this time in these transformations. We were always meant to be in community. So let this be a little bit of love, a space that holds you until you are full enough to hold yourself. And then in turn, as women do, hold someone else.
Beautiful. Beautiful. We'll share that the link in the show notes. And if somebody wanted to work with you, how do you work? Do you do one-on-one coaching, or do you do group coaching? Do you offer workshops? Like what is your model?
Yeah, I do all of those things. So I actually, I am just actually launching two programs. So one is, it's just a tiny little, it's called a popcorn program. It's 5 modules. It's super quick. And it's just enough to give you, and it's really specific to the workplace. So it goes through the top 5 symptoms that women experience in the workplace, how they show themselves, and how and what you can do about them. So that is those are modules you can work through on your own, and you also get a one-on-one coaching session with me as
Right.
part of that.
Yeah.
I also am launching my first group coaching program, and it is a 12-module course that has a weekly group coaching component and 3 one-on-one coaching sessions with me, sort of beginning, middle, and end. You can book individual sessions with me. So if you have questions about menopause and you want to get some good informed information, you can book a one-off one-on-one session with me. I also provide workshops. So I do workshops sort of semi-regularly online, and I'm also working with organizations and providing professional learning for organizations. So if you're a woman listening and you're in perimenopause and you're experiencing an impact in your work life, reach out and we can help support your whole organization so you don't feel like you're alone in that, because you're not.
Right. Awesome. Tell us the website that we can direct everybody to.
Yes, liberatedmenopause.ca.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. I really enjoyed this conversation. I love bringing these worlds together that and lifting the lid to all of who we are, which is brilliant. And Joyful Journeyer, thank you so much for tuning in. If you know a woman who's going through menopause or perimenopause, please share this with them and let them help them on their journey, because we're all in this together. All right. Have a fabulous one, and we will catch you next time. Bye for now.